Hi, my name is Gretchen Schreiber, and you are listening to In Her Words. Hello.
There she is. Hi. We were just talking about the name Gretchen and how Gretchen's very excited to meet another Gretchen.
I don't know any other Gretchens. And I'm from Kansas also, Gretchen.
Oh, I love that. No, I saw that, and I was like, what? Another Gretchen?
Right. Where are you from in Kansas?
Emporia?
Oh, okay. I know where it is, but I've never been there.
Yeah, it's the only name my parents could agree upon.
Well, I was named Melissa for 3 days until my mother decided that I didn't look like a Melissa and named me Gretchen.
You know,
it's one of my favorite stories about Gretchen.
Yeah.
Because her mother was completely right. I can't even fathom calling you Melissa.
I know. And my sister's name is Heidi, and we are neither Swiss nor German. And I don't know about you, how many German Shepherds or Dachshunds did you know named Gretchen growing up? Because I
did not know many. But my favorite story is when I did go to Germany, they misspelled my name on a Starbucks cup.
Did they call it Gleichen?
They didn't even say that. It was like something like really, really random. And I was like, guys, this is your name.
Right?
Everyone always assumes, they're like, oh, you must be like, your family must be like very recent and from Germany. I was like, we have been here for a very long time. It's purely coincidence that I have my brother is named Ben, and I just got the weird name.
Yep.
That's so funny you say that, because I was telling Gretchen, like, I know a few Gretchens, and like Gretchen is not a name that I'm like,
I don't know any.
Like, I think I just don't think of Gretchen as like an off name, or like I know like Gretchen, like when I met you and like our meet cute in our lifetime, I was like, oh, Gretchen. Yeah. Everybody I know who's Gretchen is really nice. So I was very excited to meet another Gretchen.
There we are. We're nice.
No, I used to keep a count of how many Gretchens I would meet. And it was not very many. Or if you saw them on TV, it'd be like, Crazy Aunt Gretchen. And I was like, yep, that's right.
Well, we were just saying Gretchen Wieners, but I don't touch. She was not a great She wasn't
I do have very curly hair, though, so I did get do you know why her hair is so big? It's because it's full of secrets all the time. So.
That's a good one.
Renee, when I was growing up, there were no Renees. Like, I was excited to meet my first other Renee, and now Renee is like ubiquitous. It's like in a lot of places.
Yeah, and you even have like
so like I kind of feel a little pain at Gretchen.
You have like a famous celebrity. You got like what is it, Renee Rapp?
I have Renee Russo.
Renee Russo.
I don't look nearly as good as Renee Russo, even with 30 years on me, but still, I'll take it.
I mean, there was a Gretchen Mole, and for like a very brief period, I think she was married to Liev Schreiber. So like for a hot second, my name was like, you Googled it, you got a celebrity. But
yes, Gretchen Mole was in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Going to be a hot topic for a few minutes.
I feel like Renee Russo kind of like got out of the limelight when people started Googling. Like, I feel like she hasn't been in anything in like 15, 20 years, if I'm not mistaken. Like, I feel like the Thomas Crown Affair was her like last.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, you know what she was in that she actually, and again, looked amazing, of course, is The Intern, that Anne Hathaway movie.
Oh.
Okay.
Remember that movie with Robert De Niro?
I never watched it.
I never saw it, but I remember this.
But she's in that. She's like a supporting, and of course looks fantastic and beautiful and has the best wardrobe. Always. Well, Gretchen, you are...
It is so nice to meet you.
Yes, and I can't tell you how many women are probably thinking right now you have their dream job.
I get this. I get it a lot.
Like,
I get that.
You have our dream
job.
I will tell you.
We're going to do some group pieces here, but like, no, it's really us.
It's not as glamorous as you might think. It's all I have. Like, usually I start telling people what I have to do, and they're like, you just like watch the like, oh, I can't do that. And I'm like, that's what I thought you meant.
How many books a week do you read?
In full or in parts?
Both.
I'll take both answers.
I probably read 3 to 4 books in full, and then another like 5 to 7 in parts. And that,
When you
How
say in
long?
part, is that because they're bad and you kind of put
Yeah.
them in the this is a no-go
I
file?
mean, it's not necessarily that they're bad. It's that they just don't like, they hit a red flag
Capture
for
you.
us. It's not like the vibe. It's just like, this isn't doing it.
Yeah.
Like, pass.
So
Oh my
tell
gosh.
us, because I don't know this part of your story.
Yeah.
How did you get introduced to Hello Sunshine and get this role? And it is, I mean, the meteor rise
Yeah.
of Reese and Hello Sunshine and Gretchen Schreiber associated with books, because it is. I mean, it's fascinating.
So I came out to California. I did my undergrad in Minnesota. I came out to California to do my master's at USC in producing for film. And I graduated, and like every millennial, just into the worst job market ever, the millennial tale. And if you know anything about the film industry, which I'm sure everyone listening to the podcast does, if you want to be in the film industry, you've got to be in California. And so I became a gig worker. I did everything under the sun from, I input metadata for a back end, I'm pretty sure of Disney Plus, but I could be wrong. I read scripts for a Hollywood Fellowship. I worked at a literary fest. Like I did all kinds of things. And the sort of one thing that kept everything on the board was I worked part-time at a bookstore at Barnes and Noble. Because I'd always, even in grad school, I was the book girl. If you had a question about like what book was happening in Hollywood, where, or like should we go in on a book, I got a call from like from a classmate.
Oh wow.
So like that was like my thing. And the thing about like gig work and the gig economy is that it is for the young. Like your body wakes up one day. I woke up, I had like 7 jobs at once because it's either like feast or famine. And I went, I gotta find one job and like one benefit. Like that's all I got. So I was like, whatever I can do. What can I do? Friends, tell me about jobs. I will get coffee. I will whatever. And if my first roommate in LA reached out and was like, would you be interested in a job as like Reese's personal assistant? And I was like, yeah, sure. I can get coffee. I can do whatever. And so it did that like very Hollywood back channel of like my resume went to our mutual friend, went to her friend, went over to Reese's people with like a glowing recommendation. And because it came from Mindy Kaling's office and they had just come off of Wrinkle in Time, they were like, let's call her in. So I met with her personal staff. And in the interview, I mentioned, well, I read 200 scripts a year because that was what I was doing for a fellowship that I was reading for. And I read on average 80 to 100 books a year. And they went, holy cow, what?
You're our girl.
So, we had a great conversation. I sent my thank you notes. I didn't really hear anything. And I was like, well, next interview, line it up. And then I get this email that's like, we would really love you to meet with these people over at Hello Sunshine. And like, I want people to know that this was like 2017. Hello Sunshine was not like just started. They had done like 2 book picks at this point. Nobody knew what this was going to be. And like, I'm Googling the names of people that I'm supposed to meet with. And it's like, a person who works at like Otter Media and a magazine editor or whatever. Like they had not even updated like LinkedIn profiles yet. And I was like, cool, okay. Like I'm gonna go and talk to these people. And I went in to the interview just to be like, hi, this is who I am. I read a lot of scripts. I read a lot of books. I know a lot about like bookish culture. And they were like, oh, well, we just started a book club. And I was like, oh, so you must be like all over Bookstagram and BookTube. And they went, what is a Bookstagram? And I was like, oh, okay, so we're going to like pull it back. Like we're going to start at the very ground level. And so I like started talking with them. I talked to some other people on the team. the person I had originally interviewed was like the interim CEO, eventual CEO, Sarah Hardin. And she was like, before you leave, I just want to see you. Like, I want to talk with you one last time. And I was like, cool. Like, you know, so I was probably there 4 hours, maybe just talking to various people. And Sarah comes in and is like, so we don't technically have a job for you. But
that's always what you want to hear in the interview.
That's always
right,
reassuring
right.
when you walk into
You're
a
like,
room.
I'm like, okay, like I wasn't expecting, like, I don't know what I'm doing here, but okay. I mean, she's like, but we obviously know that we can't not have you here. And so we're going to make a job. And if you're willing to work with us on what this job is going to be, like, we want you here. And like, I, at that point, like before she had asked me like, what would you want as a salary? And I like lowballed myself because I was like, job, one benefit. And she was like, and I'm going to do this because we know that like women are really terrible negotiators for themselves. So we're like doubling your asking salary.
What?
That's
Like,
amazing.
she was like,
That is
flat.
amazing.
And I was like, amazing. I was like, is it bad to say I accept? So, you know, and she's like, no. And I was like, great. When do you want me to start? And so we set a start date and I like get in my car and I call up the bookstore. Like, luckily, like all of my freelance jobs had kind of like come to a close. And I called up the bookstore and I was like, hey, did you make the schedule for next week? And they were like, no. And I was like, then don't put me on it because I quit. And they were like, oh my God, like they were very excited. They were like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. And so like they sent me 3 books. They were like, you know, just want you to get acquainted, like whatever. So I read 2 books over the weekend and I like come in. It was, I want to say it was Labor Day because it was a 3-day weekend. And I came in that Tuesday for my first day and I was like, so I read 2 of the books, but I can read the 3rd by the end of the day. And they were like, we were not expecting you to have read any of them. And I was like, well, I did. So I started there and really, like I said, book club, they had picked through September when I started. And my first book that I helped with was October 2017. And I've been there, been doing that ever since.
So here's a question. Did you agree with their September picks?
Yeah.
Before you joined?
Mean, I like
okay.
It's a little strange because I think the one thing that allows me to be better at my job is that like I like the books that we read, that we pick, but they're not like my like chosen genres, right? Like I'm a fantasy girl. I love romance. I read a lot of YA. Like, so the like thriller, contemporary, general adult fiction market I was like, I'm familiar with this because as a bookseller, like I know how to like navigate the like stacks and be like, here's what you're going to want to read. But it's not something like that I like, I'm like, oh, I'm invested in every book that I read and every book that I read is just great. So like, it allows me to be like, pull it apart a little bit more and be like, this is actually truly the best of what the genre has to offer. But I mean, that first September book pick was Celeste Ng. So how can you be angry with Celeste Ng?
Yeah.
Like,
right. No, you can't. You can't at all.
Yeah.
So.
No, then
but I love that you remember exactly what book it
was.
Yeah.
I used to have like before there were 100 books, I could just like, people would be like, what was March? And I'd be like, da-da-da-da-da. You know, I could like list them instantly in my head. And now I like, it takes me a minute to be like, where are we in the timeline? Yeah. So.
Oh, that's amazing.
Tell us about, so like you said, Hello Sunshine wasn't what we know it now when you started and the book picks and all of that. So kind of walk us through, was it like being shot out of a cannon when it took off, or was it internally, was it kind of a slow rise? Talk us through kind of how all of that has evolved from September 2017 to what we know now. That's amazing, the change.
I mean, it's always so strange, like, because I can remember when the entire office could fit around like a boardroom, like a table, you know, and now like we have 3 offices and like we can't, who knows what we're doing, you know, like, or who knows what any like one group is doing at any time, even though we have like staff meetings and things like that. I think it's like one of those things that like, what is that that David Foster Wallace speech of like, this is water. Like when you're in it, it doesn't really like feel anything. Like it feels normal. Like this is water. Until you like sort of get back out of it and you're like, oh, that's not water. That's like accelerant. I think like I think for me, when we all sort of realized, oh, this is like going to be something, was really like crawdads. Like where the crawdads sing, I think really became that moment where we went, oh yeah, this is something. Like, especially on the book club side. Like, I think the film and TV side had always had their sort of like, I mean, Little Fires Everywhere and Big Little Lies the seasons, like, that had already sort of been making its name for itself. But I think for like book club and Hello Sunshine, it really was that like first big book pick that just everyone was talking about it and everyone was reading it. And it was like the first time I think we had really seen where like the book, I think it had come out like maybe a month or a couple weeks before, had really great reviews, but not, I mean, it was a book that was bought for like $50,000. No one was expecting it to sell millions of copies. And it was the first time I think we really saw the impact that we could have, not just on the readers, but on like their lives, like the lives of authors. So
when you see books, like how far in advance you're doing, is there is there a plan where that Reese is they're gonna option it for the film or the series, or Reese is gonna go, I remember seeing her and the author on like CBS Good Morning, and all of these, when you're choosing the books, how far in advance do you know there's going to be a bigger plan for the books, or do you know that before they?
I mean, we definitely talk to the film and TV side, but that's a little, I mean, that's far out of my like purview. We talk about like what we're reading, and they'll pass over stuff to us and we'll pass over stuff to them, but it is a little bit of a like, a division wall between the two sides, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Do you, with the success of like a book like Crawdads and the different things that have gone on to film or series, has that changed the way you look at books and the way you make your picks?
Nope. I mean, I think at the end of the day, like the hardest thing about book club is that we're always just looking for a good book, and a good read, and really looking at what is Reese going to enjoy. Because I know a lot of people are like, Gretchen, you help pick the books. And I'm like, I give a book to her. Like, it's her book club. She reads everything like that we pick before we like say, yes, this one. And so I think that's what keeps the book club really interesting, is because as her tastes change or she goes through different seasons, like she's looking for different things. And so it's never a set criteria of we're looking for X. It's like we have these things that we like, but what is she feeling in the moment?
So, Gretchen, I think one of the things that's kind of popping for me in just hearing you is also just, you because of your history of how you kind of came to this position, you loved reading.
Yeah.
And you're doing something you love, So you have achieved what I think every millennial in the world wants to achieve. Right? Like it's you are a walking Instagram quote. In so many ways, right? So, when you think about books and when you're doing this every day, you're reading all of these books on a weekly basis. How has that changed you personally in your relationship with reading? Has that changed you, or do you just get excited because you get to read new books and you get preview copy and you're just like, this is amazing, and it's not a job, it doesn't feel like a job to you? Or do you feel like you have no downtime to read what you really want to read?
I mean,
in so many ways.
It's a fair question. And it's, I think, something that I tell, like we've had a couple of readers come in and try to take on the job, like try to help me with the load, especially as like publishing has gotten bigger. We've gotten a higher profile. You know, things get sent to us super, super early. You know, and the one thing I always tell them is that like there needs to be time for you to read the things you love. Because if you're not, the times in my life in this job where I have not loved the job, and my coworkers know, they're like, you are not happy right now, is when I'm not reading something for myself, like, so outside of whatever I'm reading for work. And so I try to like, I mean, again, not to be every millennial, but like have a nighttime routine of like where,
I get it.
You know, where it's like you're crawling.
I'm a millennial
So,
too.
yeah,
So
you're
just, I like to like just, I'm only 3 months like shy of not being a millennial in terms of aging up, and I'm a little jealous of like, so I kind of border, but I get it.
So I try to take that like, you know, 30 minutes or whatever before bed and just like sort of read something that I'm really excited about, or on the weekends just binge books that I really love. I'm a huge audiobook reader. People at the office are really, because I do audio for a lot of things because the pandemic broke me in a very hard way. But like I'll play like, this is how fast I listen to a book, and they're like, you can understand that? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, how many? And I'm like, it's only 500 words a minute. You can't understand what they're saying? And they're like, it's chipmunks, Gretchen. So yeah, but I think like reading, and I think the magic of it is that like, as a reader, this is going to sound terrible, but my mother always said at least it was a legal habit. Like, as a reader, you're always chasing that high of like, when you read those books that are like transformative to you, right? Like you're looking for those books of like, the first time I read The Hunger Games, or the first time, and I know she's terrible and we don't claim her anymore, but like the first time I read Harry Potter, like you're chasing these moments of like, it stops being a book and it starts like the page falls away and you're just living this amazing story. And I think that is when you know you have something when you're reading, especially like reading for book club. It's like, it's hard to explain, but it's like a gut feeling of I just need to keep going. I still have to read this. Like, this is something undeniable.
It's interesting because we've done some podcasts with some authors over the summer and so forth, and we had to read a variety of different types of genre books. And I'm like a romantic. I'm like, you know, like what you're saying, right? Like I could sit down and read a Harry Potter. I also do nonfiction. But some of the books, like I'm not a sci-fi girl. Like I have tons of friends who are, and I bought a couple of the books and I was like, oh my God, I cannot, like it was like, I was getting through like 5 pages and falling asleep. I was like, I can't do this. And it was like the longest, and it's a journey, right? To force yourself to read that.
So
I'm a big believer in you don't have to stick with a book you don't enjoy.
Life is too short.
I know people are like, oh, I would never not finish a book. I'm like, oh, I have a lot of books I haven't finished.
I have a lot.
I dove into War of, what was it? What is that? What is the book series? War of Roses that everybody's obsessed about?
Game of Thrones?
Thorns?
No,
not Game of Thrones.
The ones with the fairies and
A Court of Thorns and Roses.
Yes.
A Court of everybody has recommended that. So I dove right in. I bought the whole set, and then not even realizing it was sci-fi. Like everybody's like, "Have you read this? You should just really." And I was like, "Okay." So it's been sitting on my desk. Like I was like, "Okay." And yet it's untouched.
This is like my weird bookish knowledge. So funny story about Sarah J. Maas. When I was an intern during my grad school program, my friend had pitched me. My friend had been following her for years on Fiction Press, where she had published stuff before. And my friend was like, oh my gosh, there's this amazing book. It's coming. It's getting published. It's like Cinderella, if Cinderella was sent to the ball to like kill the prince. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I like pitched it to the place that I was interning, and I worked with the assistant, and I like tracked it down. Like we tracked it down, and I got this like early copy, and the title didn't have a title yet. It just said insert awesome title here in brackets. And I was like, you know what? I aim to have that kind of just like wherewithal.
That's awesome.
I love it.
It's a different level of respect on
right.
that.
And that book is now, it's now like Throne of Glass, and it's a great
It's
title.
huge.
It's huge, but like I unfortunately did not like it when I read it as an intern.
Like I literally picked up the first book, even, and instead of just buying the first book to test it out, I bought the whole box set.
Yeah,
and I'm like,
me too.
I'm literally looking at friends like, do you want the box set?
I'm looking at the box set.
I got like 20 pages in
I'm
it.
looking at the box set on my floor.
I literally bought it.
And my
yeah, exactly.
Like the stacks of books in my apartment right now is a little terrifying. I think it's hard for me, as sometimes I've been a huge fantasy reader for so long. So like people are like, this is the most original, da, da, da. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to tell you where she picked up every one of these things along her, which is like, no shame. I love those things too. But I'm like, let's just level set with where we are right now.
That's amazing. That's like something I hope to achieve, is to be able to call out like a book for where the themes came from, because I've read so many books where they picked it up before. Like that's serious game in the book world.
It's like my favorite thing. Like I swear, my mom was a big fantasy and sci-fi reader, and my brother got the sci-fi bug, and so then I was like, well, I have to be fantasy because I will do nothing like my brother. And so okay. I read a lot of like 80s and 90s fantasy, just because like YA children's literature as we know it just was like not a thing. And so like I feel like I inhaled all of those books, and now I can just be like, oh, you've read this book too, cool, I like that. Like, let's see more of this.
Are you part of book clubs outside of what you do? And like, do you have like certain friend groups that you still like read for, or no? Or is it like too much for you? Is it like overfacing?
I mean, when I had joined Hello Sunshine, I was going pretty religiously to a book club that I just found on Meetup. And we met at a Panera Bread, and I loved it because it was like, we called it like, what do we call it? Full contact book club. Cause like, you don't come with your note cards, like raising your hand. It's like, if you have an opinion, you just got to go for it. Like, you just got to lean in, shout your opinion, get in the argument, kind of a thing. And I don't go as often as I used to. But they're great. I still have several text group chats that are with former booksellers or other people, bookish people that I've met. And we sort of like just kind of commiserate over all of the hot takes about publishing that come out of like bookish spaces where we're like, that's not how that works. Because all of us have sort of left bookselling and have gone into like other parts of the book world. One friend is now working at a publisher. Another friend is like a librarian now. One person does like social media marketing. So we all sort of do these different things with books, but like the foundation, I often say like, people are like, you're really good at pitching things. And I was like, well, because I went to grad school technically to learn how to pitch, but it was really the 4 years as a bookseller that like really honed my skills. Cause like a teacher is going to listen to your whole pitch and be like, let's talk about how you can make that better. And like, when you're live on the floor, like you lose somebody, put the book down. You cannot recover, like move, like ask a few questions to feel where you lost them and move on, like regather and like start pulling other things, because like you can't save it. So like that like really became the like, oh, okay, here we go. I can get into this flow now of like, if I'm going to introduce you to another genre, here's how we're going to go into it, kind of a thing.
Oh, cool.
So you mentioned that when we said you have our fantasy job or our dream job, that there's things that you tell people when they say that to you. Tell us some of the, like your day in, day out things that we would be surprised that, I don't want you to burst our bubble too much, but. Yeah.
I mean,
we need dreams, Gretchen. We need dreams.
We all need the dream.
Long live the dream. But no, tell us some of the day in, day out things that people wouldn't realize about this, because we see you sitting on a plushy beanbag, with people bringing you iced coffee while you read all.
I mean, sometimes I wish people brought me iced coffees, but when I am in the office, it is very much often me who is being asked to make the coffee, because you just make it better, Gretchen. It's leftover from film school of, if one thing, learn how to make coffee. Anyway, I think the hard part is how hard you have to be on books, because we're book lovers. And like Gretchen, you, other Gretchen in the conversation have like, you mentioned that like, you're like, I DNF books. Like, I don't need to finish that book. But I think there's like a big thing with book people of like, I don't want to DNF a book. I want to finish everything. Like every book is worthy of my time. And like at some point, just given the volume, you just have to say, no, it's not. It's not worth my time. And so like there's that aspect of everything. I think there's a lot of just admin stuff of just like spreadsheets upon spreadsheets of books and when they're coming out and what's going on, you know, like it's a lot of like keeping track of things and just like splitting hairs on what book is better when, and starting to stack rank books. And that can be really hard for people because everyone wants to be like, this is a 5-star read or whatever. And like, you're now splitting hairs between like, well, this is technically a 4-star read. And like, but this book is going to go over it. Like, you know, you're having to pick your children.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and then there are things where it's like, you know, Reese will send books our way that are like, can you take a look at this? And it, you know, I'm like, yeah, sure. Let me put down the other book I was reading and pick this up. So like, you know, it's being able to read not just one book at a time. And this was like a thing that I came in with, and it's being able to read like, you know, 3 or 4, sometimes 5 books at once to like, you know, keep them all straight and not cross contaminate the pools.
Right. How you know, with the growth of the book club and Hello Sunshine in general, how inundated do you guys get with books, and do you try? Is there a push if you said, okay, this, you know, this is the 3rd book by this author, which is fine because it's deserving, or do you try to not do that? How much are things pushed on you guys now, because it is so important to be, you know, have that seal of approval and to have you know, the Hello Sunshine or the Reese stamp on things?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely we get a lot. Like there's a lot. I think there's just a lot more material in general going around publishing right now. You know, I it's very strange. I don't feel the pressure. Like we kind of know the things that we're like, you know, doing it for 7 years. I feel like I can gauge Reese's taste, and like I said, sometimes she comes back and she wants something different, and I'm like, okay, like let's read something different, you know. But I like, even with all the pressure, I don't necessarily feel the pressure from publishers. Like I'm sure they're like, we can go harder. We could go harder. And I'm like, you can try, but I'm just like, you know, if we're not going to like it, we're not going to pick it.
Right. And what about your own books?
No.
Oh, go ahead.
I was actually just about to hop there. I was going to ask how you made the transition or made the decision to go into your own books, and what that process for you was like from a creative perspective. I know you put a lot of yourself into your book. As well as your upcoming.
Well, alongside, I think, like, I know very few booksellers who are not like, I also would like to write a book one day. They exist. They're just very few and far between. And so I like came to Hello Sunshine as a writer. I had written, strangely enough, I had gone to grad school for film because I thought it would be easier than going and getting my MFA for writing for children and young adults. Why I thought it would be harder for me to get into like a low residency as opposed to USC film school. Why I thought that would be harder, I don't know. But I did. And so I wrote my master's thesis, which was obviously a screenplay, but I wrote that. And then I'd always sort of been writing books. And I had finished a couple while I was working at the bookstore and just not getting any traction. And I had pitched what would eventually become Ellie to a friend on just like an offhanded thing, because I would tell people about my life in and out of the hospital and the funny things I would do. And my friend was like, that's a book. And I was like, I don't write contemporary. And she was like, I'm not going to let you not write this book. And I was like, okay, have fun. I'm going to go dragons or, you know, monsters, swords. And during the pandemic, like pandemic times happened, and I left LA, like I feel like so many people, and I lived in my parents' basement, or not in my parents' basement, but like that's where my office was for the duration of the 18 months I was there. And I said, what if I wrote this book? I don't necessarily recommend writing a book about, like, doctors are a very nuanced take on doctors during a pandemic where doctors are kind of the heroes. That's maybe not the story that everybody wants to hear. So I wrote that, and, you know, I think it's like a testament to Sarah Hardin. I was just like a very caring person in general. I had a bad day, like just querying and all this stuff. And she was like, send me your book. Because we had just started YA book club. And like the next time we got on, she's like, Gretchen, we read a lot of YA, wouldn't you say? And I was like, yeah, we're reading a lot of YA right now. And she's like, this is better than most YA we're reading. We are going to figure this out. And she ended up sending it over to CAA personally, to the head of the CAA Lit department. And I got this email one day that was just like, putting us all together. And it was the head of CAA Lit and this new agent. And I was dumb. And I just thought, oh, this is like a nice thing, like Hello Sunshine, very big CAA client, Reese, very important CAA client at the time. Reese, husband, partner at CAA, you know, all of this stuff. And so I get on this call. I'm not prepared. Again, moral of my life is I'm not prepared for any like big life-changing call I take. I was not prepared for this call at Hello Sunshine that I had. I was not prepared for this call. And I'm like, she's like, oh my God, I love the book. Let's talk about it, all this stuff. And I was like, I'm sorry, what kind of call is this? And she's like, oh, well, I'm making an offer of representation. And I was like, oh, so I'm like having this conversation and like G-chatting on my friends being like, you know, those calls that you always tell me to be prepared. What am I supposed to ask?
Oh my goodness.
That's hysterical.
I love it.
And so, yeah, we went through several rounds of edits. I went out on sub with Alex at the end of August. I was like also moving back to LA at that time. So it was like, oh, I don't have to think about this right now. And then it like contemporary and YA right now is just like a really hard sell. And I was I was planning a trip back to New York to go. My mom was having brain surgery. And I know, I'm like, oh, it's a good ending. She's fine.
Oh, good.
But she was like, can you come be with me during this time and like be with your dad and everything? I was like, yeah, I can come. So I was like, I'll go to New York for a few days. I've never actually been to New York without like, you know, spending all my time for work things. So I was going to have lunch with Wednesday Books because we had done a fair amount of Wednesday books for YA book club. And they were like, we just want to take you out for lunch, say thank you, all this stuff. And I emailed Alex and I was like, do I say something? Like, I'm ready to put, like, we had been out to Wednesday. I hadn't heard it. We hadn't heard anything back. And I was like, I'm ready to be like, I'll put my career on the line, ask the pointed question. And she was like, let me make some calls. And there was some backroom dealing. And she's like, you don't have to say anything. They have the book. This person is reading it. But if they mention it, just be like, I'll like email me. We'll put, and then push it to me and like, I'll take over. I was like, amazing. And so we had lunch. It was great. The next day I get up, I go out to Long Island to meet my parents. I'm hanging out with my parents, expecting a work call of all things. So I have my phone like on full blast. And it's my agent who's calling me. And she answers the phone and she's like, congratulations, future published author. And they made a thing. And so my mom got to go into surgery being like, you guys better behave, because if you don't, my daughter will put you in a book. So So anyway, so that's a long story short, but like, I love my editor, Eileen Rothschild at Wednesday. Just had like really smart notes for the book, and you know, there are parts of it that I think make the book stronger that would not be there without her like grand vision for it. So
What are the key like when you look back on writing and the whole process of it, did it give you a different perspective as to what, you know, the authors that are pitching you, or, you know, what they go through? And like, what did you learn out of that? What did you learn out of that experience? What do you take with you in terms of like,
it's like,
what does that look like?
I think it's like twofold. On the one hand, I'm now like, this is somebody's baby, Gretchen. Be nice about it in your notes. And that's why I started keeping like a written note where I can just be like, no, like I can be my own mean self. But I think it also gave me a unique vision on what it means to be like an author and what it means to be a publisher. And I often, because now I straddle this line, I feel like excuse me, I will often talk to my author friends and I'll be like, do you want me to explain the publishing business behind this decision to you? Or do you want to be angry right now? We can do both. And they'll be like, explain it to me. And I'll like walk them through the business decisions of how they got there. And sometimes I'll have my friends in publishing call me up and they'll be like, this author is being ridiculous and demanding and da 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 da. And I'll be like, do you want me to talk you through the author position right now? And she was like, fine. And I like talk to them like, this is what they're seeing and this is how they're reacting. And she's like, okay, that's fair. So I think it's a lot of like, I think my publisher appreciates that I can understand the business decisions that they're making. Even if it can be hard sometimes to swallow, I can be like, I understand why we're doing this decision, you know? I think it's also just everyone is, my film business teacher, when I took a business class in grad school, was like, we are in a competition for eyeballs. And I think that competition for eyeballs in recent years has only gotten tougher. And because you're not just competing with TV or movies, it's TV, movies, books, games, online, TikTok, YouTube, you know, and getting eyes on anything is really, really hard. So it makes me feel a lot more for the authors who like, you know, I've seen many author friends who put like the Reese's sticker on their vision boards, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Like, oh, okay, you know, and have these like big lofty dreams. And it's always just like, you know, write the best. They're like, what can I do to write a Reese's book club pick? And I'm like, write a good book. And that's subjective. Like, it's also just made me realize how subjective like reading is. And it can feel personal, and my friends are going to laugh when they read this because they're like, Gretchen, you're a marshmallow when it comes to this. But like, you know, not every book is for everybody, and that's okay. But my book should be for everybody. No, I'm just kidding. But you know, it can be a hard pill to swallow that like it's not, you know, it's not for everyone, and that's okay.
Did you, just because it's like across all the authors we've spoken to you and, you know, writing is so personal, right? And you're so integrated in it. It's like, how did you, you know, and we don't, obviously we're not friends, but like, what type of vulnerability did you go through on that front? You know, cause like putting yourself into like, even like Gretchen and I have floated, like we want to write our own books about XYZ, right? And it's very vulnerable to sit down and put word to page, right? Like, what was that process like for you?
I mean, I think it was very, like, the writing process itself, the drafting process was very, like, freeing. Because you could kind of just be like, this is it, right? Like, this is my chance to say something that, like, maybe I felt all this time. And these really weird feelings of, like, guilt, responsibility, like not wanting to talk about it, but wanting to talk about it and not trusting people, like all these like very vulnerable things from myself, I should say. I think publishing has been, maybe we'd be a little less vulnerable. You know, like, because it can be really hard to watch people be like, well, I think Ellie is mean and she's selfish and she's self-centered. And I'm like, okay, but Ellie is a little bean and she's a 16-year-old dealing with adult problems. Like,
Yeah.
let's.
Right.
Her brain is not fully formed.
Yeah. No, completely.
So I think it's always that dance, right? Of being how do you make it vulnerable so that people can identify with it, and how do you also protect yourself a little bit, but also, is there any protecting yourself when you make art?
Yeah.
Right.
Because it's so personal. Yeah.
With your day job and being an author, was there a part of you as you were writing that kind of the commercial side of it came in, of like, I need to do this because this will make it sell better, or this will make it, could you kind of remove that and make it all art, like you said, or did the business side of it play into that as well?
I mean, I think there was definitely like a business side, and like, I want to rewrite the like sicklit genre, if you will, of like, we've seen all these highly successful books. None of them are written by people who actually experienced those moments, right? Like,
Right.
how can we like reclaim this genre, this like idea
Mm-hmm.
for ourselves? So, that's like the lofty hope. Lots of things
Yeah.
stood in the way of that, but that's okay. We go on. I think in like my second book, and even as like I'm sort of prepping this like third book to pitch to my publisher, we've talked about business decisions in terms of like, contemporary is a really big struggle right now, and especially in YA, it's just not moving. And my publisher, my editor, feels very comfortable having that conversation like with me, because she's like, I know you're gonna like not take this as like your art is unworthy, but you're gonna take it as like the sales are just not there, like, and
Right.
it's not
Yeah.
for a lack of trying and switching it up and whatever. And so like, what can we do? Like, how can we take your ideas and do something new with them? So like, my second book, I wrote a whole contemporary book that I turned in, and then I turned in a bunch of pitches to work on option material while my editor was reading said book. And then she comes back to my agent and is like, okay, hear me out. What if we changed books? And we changed books because it was a business decision. Like, so it's now like, instead of another contemporary, it's like a contemporary with more magic and like all this stuff, and then like third book, she was like, what if we just went full magic? Like, what if we just went full second world fantasy? And I was like, okay. Like, it's like full circle back around of like, I'm once again with monsters and sword fights.
That's awesome.
But yeah.
So Gretchen, I know we're coming to time, but I guess, we ask a lot of our guests what they're reading. We know you can't be like, I'm not even asking that, but my question for you is, if you were deserted on an island for the rest of your life, what are the 5 books you would take to the island with you that you could reread multiple times? Like, what are your top 5?
Do series count as one book? Okay.
Yes, series count as one book. So I'll give you that.
Okay.
I'll give you that.
So number one,
she's finding a loophole already.
like, right? I'm like, I gotta make some caveats to the rules. So number one is actually a very easy question. Number one, Crown Jewel by Sherwood Smith is one of my number one rereads. I reread it every year and have reread it every year since high school. It's one of those books that I like find something new. It gives me all the same feelings, cringes, like, oh, I just love it. The entire Nalini Singh Sai Changeling series, which is going to keep me occupied because it's like 20 books and going. So like, but is always one of my biggest like recommendations to people if they're trying to get into like fantasy romance. I know it's terrible and I'm going to get a lot of hate. I got to have Harry Potter for the nostalgia, if only because I feel like I read the 4th book like 30 times one year because like it came out when I was in the hospital. My mom read it entirely out loud to me. Like it, like the emotional memories attached to it are just too big. They're there.
Yeah.
Like, and she ruined it, but I can't let it go.
Yeah, you have to bifurcate.
Yeah, like you're like, and how can I like split things off in my head? I
You
probably
can.
also have
Yep.
to go Elsie Silver's Chestnut Creek series, which is a romance. Like, I'm very varied here, as you can tell. Like, I'm all
Yeah.
over the place. Chestnut Creek series, which is like cowboy romances, which I never thought would be my jam, but the Kansas in me is coming out.
I like it.
And then probably, this is going to also be like really weird and off ball. I'd probably take my, I can't remember the couple that do the translation, but they're very highly sought. But I would take that version of Anna Karenina. So like,
Okay.
I have just given you.
I will tell you, I only have one on the list that I would take with me, and that would be Anna Karenina. I could read it. I love Anna Karenina. It's one of my all-time favorite books
It's
of time.
so many things
Me too.
about it. I remember like reading it for the first time and just being like, huh, okay, maybe I don't like the English classics, but maybe I was supposed to be in Russia all this time.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's a
Oh my
beautiful.
God, it's
so
amazing.
yeah, that's my gamut of like romance to fantasy,
I love
children's lit, and classics. So,
I love it.
These
I
are
love it.
amazing. It's incredible. Gretchen, it has been so lovely getting to know you on this
Yes, this has been
podcast.
so-
Like, this
so
has
much
been
fun.
so enjoyable, and you have our dream job, so we're just going to continue to just
live
dream
in that
about
bubble.
you. We're gonna live. We're like Instagram. We're just
There you
gonna
go.
like be like Gretchen's Instagram, Bookstagram, Gretchen.
Bookstagram, yeah.
Yeah.
You
do
see
it.
all the things that I'm like not reading for work. It's always the hard part. I'm like, can I talk about that book yet? So.
Oh my gosh,
Thank
so
you
amazing.
so much for
Yeah.
taking the time. It was so lovely to meet
So
you.
lovely. This was great.
And we would love to, potentially have you back for the summit if it works out for you. And, just the summits in February, it's like, we love it. And, Gretchen and I are avid readers. So, in terms of, we'll be on the lookout in terms of other recommendations. And I feel like I haven't heard of like 3 of your books. So I'm definitely going to check them out.
You
After
should.
this.
Like, they're all my favorites.
But I'm only buying. But on your sets, I'm only buying the first
no,
one because I'm
fair.
not going.
It's fair. I will say, like,
I'm not buying book sets right now.
I will say, if you want to, like, my recommendation for the side changeling, because it is 20 sets. My favorite one is number 6, and I like it because it's what they call it, like an alpha romance. So they're both. So it's like a shifter romance. So you have to like talk about like hierarchies of dominance or whatever in the packs, and they both are like the same level, but they belong to different packs. So the central like issue of their romance is that like this is so our packs are so central to us. We have this feeling of it. If one of us leaves, like we will be now less than we were, and how will that not affect and potentially like poison our romance? So how can we make it work?
Oh, that's so interesting.
So like, yeah. So like, if you're gonna start with one, that would be the one. And they like, it's a very number 6. It's a very good series. It like it will clue you into everything that's going on. You don't like. I started with number 10, to which everybody hates me because that's like this like romance that has been built up for like 10 books, and I was like, I just started there.
You're like, I just went straight to the gold.
Straight to whatever the library had on its shelf.
Love it. Love it. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, keep me updated, whatever is in February. This was great.